What's up? Welcome back to my channel, or for the first time if you're new, I'm Sylvan, and today I'm going to be reacting to Lingsha's trailer, Burning Scent of Home. I'm really interested to see what this has in store, as Lingsha was a fairly interesting character in the recent Xianzhou storyline, but who wasn't super prevalent. She wasn't like a major player really, so there's a lot we still don't know about her, and I'm curious to see how this is going to present her. And I also just like her character quite a bit, and I'm considering pulling for her, so I'm curious to see what this is like. Feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, leave a comment on your thoughts, and let's get into this. Ooh. Okay, we're still in the Japanese. Whoa. Interesting. I haven't heard her Japanese voice prior to this, so... Interesting how she's, like, flying around. Oh. Interesting music. Ooh. That's a cool sounding instrument. Alright, what's this building up to? This is really building up. Oh? Giant ho-ho. Whoa, I mean. Okay. Liu, Locha. Jesus. Okay, cool. Not anything crazy, but I like it. It fits her vibe. Doesn't really tell me much more about her than what I already understood, but it's cool. I'm gonna see what I can parse out from going more thoroughly through it. So what I'd say I'm getting from this overall trailer is a sense of confidence. She's very confident in what she does. She knows what she's doing, and she shows it. She shows her competence. As well as this theming of scents and smells, which is very in line with sort of a lot of the things going on with her character. Though it's not as explicit as someone like Emily in Genshin, she does have a lot of how she does medicine stuff seem to be tied to fragrances and incense and that kind of thing, which winds up with her having a good sense of smell, that kind of thing. And the idea that she can smell Huohuo's worries, so there's no reason for her to speak. She already understands what Huohuo needs as she smells the smell of fear, which of course she does. It's Huohuo we're talking about. And the way she flies around, I'm curious if that is something she actually is able to do, or if this is more just a representation of her confidence and capability and grace, basically. I'd be curious to see which of those it is. And so she says she can help, but first, give your body and mind to me. And then we go to the splash art. That's an interesting line, because in the story I never really saw her as the kind of character to make these sort of Faustian bargain type things that sort of sounds like. Like, that's the kind of line that would be perfectly in line with something Jade would say. Which makes me curious if, once she's settled in the Alchemy Commission on the Luofu, if we're going to be able to see more of that side of her, that more confident, elegant, strong side of her, where she's able and willing to sort of take what she wants because of what she's able to give to people and supply to people. Now, of course, it's also possible that she's just being playful or something like that, but it very much has that sort of dominant self self-confident vibe to it, and I'm curious to see how that reflects in her character going forward. And then we just get some interesting imagery as we get this distorted voice saying, "Help me." And I don't know the Japanese voices of characters well enough, so I don't know if that's necessarily like a distorted ho-ho voice or if it's something else, but this distorted voice calling out for help, she hears it. We get this imagery of a destroyed space in tatters, things all over the floor. The distorted voice says, "Who are you?" as all these spirits move around the space. Once again saying, "Help me, who are you?" Just repeating that. And I think it's supposed to represent Ho-Ho as this more spectral version of her manifests as we see these spirits that represent her fear, presumably. These warriors looming over her. And Lingsha is just observing this. And then we have some very interesting lines throughout this, like this one, "The smoke rises from the fireless stove." An interesting line. I don't necessarily know what that is making reference to. I'm trying to think of what a fireless stove could mean in this context. Perhaps it's the idea of the smoke rising from the stove is not a sign of fire, it's not something to actually be scared of, it is merely an illusion trying to trick you into fear. That's like a weird angle I could take at it if we're trying to use this line as Lingsha trying to explain to Ho-Ho why she shouldn't be afraid of, like, it's all just smoke and mirrors. There's no real fire to be afraid of going on here. But I don't know, that feels a little flimsy. I don't know. I don't know what else it could necessarily be. It might just be that's not clicking for me. Then we're in this much more refined space as she walks through alone until we get this sudden imagery of the spirit of Tail, as she says everything in this world is fleeting, her line that she says in her ult, which is an interesting line. It speaks to a certain philosophy that, given it is the line she says in her ult, I would imagine is fairly core to her philosophy. This idea that even somewhere like the Xianzhou, somewhere where everyone is long-lived, if not immortal, things are still fleeting, things still die and pass on and are destroyed and are forgotten, which is an interesting contrast to her surroundings. Perhaps that comes from her history of having the reputation of her and her master stripped from her and forced to leave the Luofu, only now being able to return, having had to essentially rebuild her own reputation. I could see that as being sort of an origin to that belief of this idea that anything could be lost at a moment's notice. You never know what will happen, what will go wrong, how long you will have the things in your life that you cherish. But she's not saying it in any way that's like sad or melancholic, really. Recalling how it sounds in her English voice, she says it with almost a playfulness, as if she's accepted the fact in a way that is almost more freeing than anything, which is interesting. We then have the little fluffy rabbit spirits coming out of her sensor or whatever it is. Things dim in the room as smoke comes in, and then she says, "Matters of the heart should be treated with medicines of the heart," which, once again, I'm not necessarily sure what she's exactly referencing there, but it does very much get to that idea that when it comes to emotional problems, such as in this case, crippling fear for Ho-Ho, it's hard to treat such a issue with traditional medicine or more practical means. It really needs to be dealt with from an emotional angle. Depending on how you interpret it, you could go the route of either you need empathy to be able to help people process their emotions and be able to understand what they're going through, but another angle also is simply that you need to know how to evoke the right emotions to deal with the emotional issues someone is currently having. It could be a much more manipulative angle. Now, of course, in this case, that is in a hypothetically good way, as it is treating a illness of the heart, to use their words a little bit, which generally speaking is good. Something along those lines is, I think, what it's getting at, but it's not entirely sure, like, the exact interpretation of this doesn't jump out at me as much as I would hope. But then the entire room fades away until it's just her with all of this smoke and fragrances and energy swirling around her as she says, "Clear the smoke, put out the fire," which is interesting when compared to the line from before saying that the smoke rises from the fireless stove, which implies there is no fire. Or I guess to go back to that previous line, it could be a different interpretation of, rather than it being that there is no fire, so the smoke is something not to be worried about, it could be the idea that there is a fire in the fireless stove, as you can see from the smoke, and that's a problem. Hence, we must clear the smoke and put out the fire. That potentially is another angle of she's more so just on a metaphorical level identifying the problem of there's a fire where there shouldn't be, at which point she finds this image of this monster, of this spirit, and it looks like almost a sort of monstrous version of Tail. But as she sees this image, Lingsha says, "Ah, so your fear takes this form," as she reaches out to it. And as she touches it, it glows, and a voice calls out saying, "How many times are you gonna disturb me?" Presumably being the root of her fear, saying, "Girl, this is no place for you." The deep-seated fear in Huoho is trying to cast Lingsha away, to stop her from removing it, and it takes the form of a massive Huoho. At which point, Lingsha actually agrees, saying, "You have a point. I don't belong here, but this is also no place for you. This deep-seated fear does not belong in Huoho's heart. She has no reason to be so afraid." At which point, she fucking explodes the Huoho spirit into one of her big fluffy smoke bunnies, and she just politely asks the fear spirit or whatever to leave. "Please leave. You're not belonging here, neither am I, so I will leave as soon as you are gone." And then once she has removed it, she says, "Ah, the evil stench has been eliminated. The stench of fear is gone." And we get her Star Rail logo as it then moves into the end scene. Very energetically and appreciative sounding, Huoho says, "Thank you very much, ma'am," bows, and then moves away in like the most happy we've pretty much ever seen Huoho. And Lingsha just goes, "All right, next." At which point, it's fucking Jing Liu that's coming next. Locha's in the line. So is fucking Blade and Guinaifen and Susheng. Like, that's 3 fucking criminals. What are they doing here? Oh, and then we have a fucking, like, Mesmer, they're called, I believe, which is just fun. We know she has one. And that's pretty much the end of it. We see Huoho meeting back up with Guinaifen and Susheng. It looks like perhaps the two of them aren't in line. They were just waiting for Huoho. The ghost hunting squad never breaks up. A really simple trailer, all things considered. Rather cryptic, though. The meaning of a lot of what she's saying doesn't jump out at me as much as a lot of the other ones do, which leaves Lingsha as a character being much more of a mystery, which in a way I like. In a way I find that interesting, that she doesn't just lay out her cards of who she is as much, but to an extent I do wish we could have seen more of her. Perhaps if we had gotten a Moment Among the Stars or a Myriad Celestia trailer related to her, we could have gotten that, but I don't know. I guess we'll just have to see what she's like continuing throughout the game. So with that, I don't think I have too much more to say, so I'll leave it there. Feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Leave a comment on your thoughts, and I hope you all have a great day, and goodbye!